We heard you, Sam. Make them hear you. Make them hear you by pen and voice and action, each and every one of us. Voting is one of the most sacred acts I do. I have a sense of awe whenever I vote, whether it's filling out my ballot at home and triple checking that I filled the right box, or dropping off my ballot at an early ballot location, or my favorite, voting in person. Standing in line with others who are just as committed to fulfilling their civic duty, seeing all of the volunteers on the sidewalks, feeling passionate about their candidates, whatever side they are on, seeing the volunteers checking folks in, and then walking into your own portable sacred altar and making your sacred choices. When I turn my ballot in to be swallowed by that machine and get my little sticker in exchange, I have rarely not had a tear in my eye about the process. I remember taking my kids to vote with me, showing them how I did it, having them silent and watching it as if it were a very serious church. They also understood the reverence of the place. One of the many ways that I know that I've succeeded as a parent is I often call my kids when voting season is upon, and it is almost always the case that they have voted before I have. I can't imagine them not ever taking advantage of the opportunity to vote. It was an honor to be involved and active in educating people in the grassroots work to pass Amendment 4 in Florida when I lived there, which gave people with felonies on their records who had completed the terms of their sentence a chance to vote again. It brought about 1.6 million voters back onto the rolls in Florida, and, if it was possible, made me feel even more reverent about the act. Understanding that voting means voting for all of us, like the animals in the desert, making sure that all of the voices are heard. Now, you don't need me to tell you that 2024 is going to be a grueling, stressful, up and down, like a not fun roller coaster kind of year. In our presidential race, we have some historic challenges to our democracy in play. And I do believe the future of our democracy, what it looks like, how democratic it actually is, and how much power the state can have is on the line. Each week, we're going to have headlines that stress us out. What's happening in this trial here? Is the Supreme Court going to weigh in and make decisions there? Can you believe he said that? He got how much money from foreign heads of state? He wants to do what with the military? It is a really, really bad reality show where the plot line wouldn't be believed if it weren't real. But let us not forget what is also happening in the state. Here in our state's capital, there is so much online for our individuals, especially those who are in the margins, those who are homeless, our trans siblings, our folks of color, how we respond to police violence, all of that is happening as well. And I love how informed many of you are. How many of you read the local paper at least a few times a week? Okay. over-indexing the population, I just need to say, right? How NPR listeners? Anyone? NPR? Yes. Local news watchers? Yeah. How about network or cable news shows? Okay, some of you are raising your hands for all of these. That is awesome. An informed electorate is a powerful tool of democracy. But how many of you are feeling like you get too much news and it's stressing you out? Yeah, me too. That is also true. I want to encourage you to think of it like a spiritual practice. Get as much as you need, but then figure out when it is too much and turn it off. Make sure you practice the balance between information and self-care. Remember that doom watching, doom scrolling, doom conversations, or doom obsession does not change the impending doom. What we need to do is balance the doom with action, hope, and care. We are talking about voting today on the birthday weekend of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. because equal access to voting was a key component of his civil rights movement.
In the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., "So long as I do not firmly and irrevocably possess the right to vote, I do not possess myself." And in the words of John Lewis, the right to vote is the most powerful, non-violent tool we have in a democratic society.
You've heard my stance on my personal vote, and I would wager to say that many of you agree with me on that. And I think many of us are involved in Get Out the Vote actions. I can't even tell you how many thousands of postcards people in this congregation wrote last year and the year before. The list was in the thousands. We were one of the top Unitarian Universalist congregations in the country in our efforts to UU the vote, which is the way that we use our values to encourage people to vote their UU values, both within our denomination and outside of it. But we also need to think of other ways we can be activists and carry Dr. King's legacy forward. We're not doing enough to address gerrymandering in our country. Powerful players can reshape a district to sway an outcome. That strategy takes place in cramped rooms in every state in our country. It's a way to make sure the democratic process isn't truly democratic, and it is most impacting our Black and brown siblings. And it makes certain districts truly undemocratic. Also, we need to be aware of who cannot vote and why, and advocating for their vote. Too often we talk about encouraging people to vote without noticing who can't vote and why. Currently in Arizona, people who have completed the terms of their sentences in the judicial system can have their rights restored. But those who are still caught up in the carceral system, and that is definitely a more Black and brown and poor population, do not. The inequities in our carceral system are just another way to remove freedom from a certain group of people.
In the words of John Lewis, the vote is the most powerful instrument ever devised by man for breaking down injustice and destroying the terrible walls which imprison men because they are different from other men.
What about how we vote? Luckily, Arizona is still a state where you can vote by mail, and indeed, it is how most people do it in Arizona. But boy, they're working on taking that convenience away. citing security, even though there is no data showing that there is more voter fraud by mail as there is in any other way. No, the only thing that changes is access to voting, which affects those without resources more. And as intimidation of people who believe differently gets bolder, we need to make sure that we absolutely condemn, in the strongest words, any attempt to intimidate voters, poll workers, poll counters, or government officials overseeing a fair vote. I am planning on serving as a fair vote chaplain this year, and I encourage you to see what you can do as well.
And in the words of John Lewis again, the vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It is the most powerful, non-violent tool we have in a democratic society, and we must use it.
And voting on the first Tuesday of November is a historic date whose reasons have become outdated. We don't need horsets to carry ballots anymore, and we don't need to be voting on a random Tuesday. If we value democracy and voting, we should make Election Day a federal holiday. We should provide paid time off. Ideally, if our polling places are going to have hours-long lines, we should provide childcare, food, and shelter. It is actually a wonder that as many people vote as do when there are so many obstacles put in their ways. On this Martin Luther King weekend, we lift up that access to free, fair, democratic, and anti-oppressive voting is one of the most important tools we have for change. It was a key focus in the civil rights movement of King's time, and it remains so today. King's legacy inspires us all to actively engage in the democratic process as a means of fostering positive societal transformation. It is a key element in our quest for a just and equitable society, not just as people who live in the United States, but as Unitarian Universalists and world citizens. With our belief in the inherent dignity and worthiness of all humans, with our values of equity, justice, and compassion, we look to our teachers from the civil rights movement like Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, Bayard Rustin, and of course, Dr. King. Dr. King recognized that voting is the catalyst for change, and without the power to shape politics, dismantle systemic injustices, and amplifying the voices of those who have been long silenced, we cannot move the efforts of his dreams forward.
In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter.
So let us not be silent. Let us be loud and proud about our values this year. Stay after service to learn how you can have a voice in the Arizona legislative process. There is a talk about having a small group to discuss legislative specific things for Arizona. Let our civic engagement team know if you're interested in that. We are continuing to work here at UUCP on the petition to legalize abortion. UUCP is taking a strong position on that, and you have seen lots of activists come and a lot of our folks registering those petitions. Look for UU the Vote activities later this year. Maybe sign up to be a poll worker. There are so many ways you can be involved, not only for yourself, but for those who do not have a voice. And let us also combine that with your own personal balance of information, action, and self-care. Our small groups ministries has a small group to work through the anxiety that we will be experiencing this year. Does that sound like that might help you? Would you like to be in a small group with others sharing anxiety and anxiety release tools? Turn off the TV when you need. Get outside. Find joy. Yes, all of this is important, but so are you. Balance the anxiety with your own self-care. If you need an excuse, tell them your minister said you had to do it.
And in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice.
Our votes are the tools that shape that arc. Our values are the way that we know which way to bend it. Our actions are the efforts that slowly, inch by inch, do the hard work of bending. May we be inspired by the legacy of those who marched before us and be courageous in our commitment to voting as an act of love, of justice, and of hope. May the ballot be our sacred instrument in the symphony of justice. May it be so.